Good evening and welcome to Sensual Talk. This is where we explore all things related to sensuality and pleasure. I'm your host, Emanuela Fernandes. If you are a spiritual person, then your spiritual path probably inspires you and grounds you. But is it possible for a religious path to also interfere with your ability to experience sensual pleasure? This evening, I'm joined by my friend and a professional pleasure coach, Beth Ostrander, to chat about the relationship between religion and sensuality. Beth, good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on Sensual Talk.
Yeah, I love it. Well, you know, I always get really excited. We talk so much when we get together. We had to stop a number of conversations before we started here.
Yes, I remember the first time I met Beth, okay? It was quite a day. I mean, somebody actually had to stop us and say, hang on a second, we're closing. And we said, oh my goodness, there are so many things to explore, there are so many things to talk about. I love what you do. I am such a fan of your work. And I'm so excited to have you a part of Sensual Talk. So thank you.
Yes.
Listen, it's a big subject to get to, but before we dive into this exciting, kind of controversial subject, I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. I hope that you can stick with us. I hope you can stick around. I also want to thank Orange Media for sponsoring this evening's presentation. And let's dive in. I mean, a lot of people are going to say, well, you shouldn't talk about politics and religion. But guess what? Tonight, we're going to go and explore the subject of religion and sensuality because we have an expert on the subject. Because Beth, you're really passionate about this particular subject of sensuality, sexuality, and religion. Why is that?
Oh, so many things around this topic get me excited. So reel me in. But I get so excited because it's part of my journey. I grew up in a religious environment, a beautiful, loving religious home. My background was Christian evangelical. Which meant it was really the heart, the foundation of my family and my community, and really loving, like amazingly loving. And the area of sexuality, though, got really shut down in that environment. And the more I talk to people along the way about my journey, I constantly hear, regardless of religion, or sometimes not even religion, but they're in a society that is so based on a religion that it's almost the same effect. And I call it affected by religion. And because of that, there's I grew up in this place where I had to shut myself down. I had to shut down natural desires, even as a young girl, and it caused confusion. It caused me to mix up what I want with what's wrong, what's right, and it really created in me, in the area of a physical relationship to myself, but then it spread out every which way that I didn't even know what I wanted, because I won't get right into the meat of the stories, I remember some certain specific stories that had me start these belief systems off, but this very, very loving and yet restrictive environment caused me as a child to be confused around my pleasure, my wants, my desires, wrong and right, and then had me getting into a relationship, which again, also wonderful man, just not a great fit for me, and in this department we both had that background, and so we didn't talk about it. And I think because of the environment, there is a missing conversation around sex in general. I mean, I find that that's true every which way. We talk maybe in the vulgar or humorous terms of sex, and we're here in Toronto, and I think Toronto's actually quite open to a lot of extent. But when we're speaking of our actual journey, the things that are going on between us and our partner, how it's maybe not going well, that's a really tough conversation to have. And I think those affected by religion, and certainly in my experience, it was a wrong conversation to have. Even the desires were wrong, so you're not even having the conversation internally. Therefore, when it's coming out, often it comes out in a blame or attack or just a shutdown and a disappointment, and it ends up being this environment of care and love, and we're going to stick together because there's a value system there, that we're going to stick together at all odds. And then there's just so much dissatisfaction and confusion. It's a breeding ground for really confusing unhappiness. Yeah, and I could go on, and I know I just wanted to touch the surface, but because of that, for one, I see it must get talked about. I don't know if I've even said this to you, because we've talked about it a lot, but I talk out loud about sex, and every time I do, even coming to this conversation, as much as I have an ease with you, when I'm going to be public, I get uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I think it's this underlying subconscious, like, this is wrong to talk about.
And you think that stemmed from your kind of religious conditioning?
Yes. And I want to be really cautious, because I am so grateful for my religious conditioning. The value systems I was given, and then, I needed to assess it, I needed to deal with it. There was a lot of things I didn't like, and I've had to go on that journey. But there's such amazing value in what religion is trying to offer. Religion's trying for us as humans to make sense of us soulful beings, and we mess it up, basically. But there's a lot of beauty, and then there's a lot of things that can be challenging, and sex is one of them. Sex is, I think, those affected by religion have a dampening of their sexuality, I would say 90%. Like, I'm totally making that up, but a high degree in who I talk to. And I want to say one more thing, and this is I think the thing that gets me the most excited, and like why I zoom in on this area. Those who are either brought up in religion or who are drawn to religion, because it's not always being brought up, are people who are really called to do amazing things. Like, there's a sense of, I want to contribute to the world. I want to do something. I want to give back. And what I've observed is that there's this awesome, like completely cool connection between when your sexual passion is dampened, your passion in life is dampened. It's a total parallel journey. So it's this amazing group of people who are almost destined, if I'm going to use that word, destined to do great things, who are the most shut down. And it's like, oh my gosh. Okay, I always use this weird analogy. I hate cleaning the house. Who does like it? I don't know. But if I'm going to clean something, I kind of want to clean something messy, so that it's like afterwards you feel like really proud. You can go back and look, like, oh, that's amazing. The before and after. We all like the stupid before and after shots, right? And it's like that. It's like, this is the best group to work with, because there's this amazing passion hidden down, repressed, because the shutdown and the unfortunate misinterpretation of what God or higher power intended. I mean, we're sexual beings. We're spiritual, sexual, we're all of these things. But it got shut down by human interpretation. And so it's like this massive, amazing potential that got overly shut down, because everyone in society is somewhat shut down around this. But this seems to be a much more particular shutdown. And so it's the most fun observing and working with my clients who are in this realm. That's why I zoom in there. So those two things.
Very interesting. So what's the magnitude, Beth, of this issue of the people who are kind of oppressed, and their sensuality and their sexuality are oppressed by religion? What's the magnitude of this issue?
Well, quite frankly, I'm really, really wanting to get studies done, and I don't have, so I love that question. I want to know that answer. I really want to do studies all across all the different religions and even spiritual groups, because I'm speaking religion, but a lot of us are not relating at this moment in time to religion. We're relating to like a spiritual journey. I am talking about any kind of shutdown around sex being wrong. Right? Okay, so the magnitude, at least from just what I've observed, is across the board, when it's religious experience and upbringing, it is dramatically different repression. Now, I observe different things that have people shut down. There are, society. I mean, we're all very aware of the Me Too movement. So women and the women's movement, and there's a shutdown of society around expression of our sexuality, expression in a physical way of who we are as humans. And then there's that, a societal kind of wrong making, or maybe just not sure what we're doing. I think it's partly that. But then there's also so many people have had like experiences that were intended to be pleasurable and they weren't. And that has us shut down, shy away, be confused. So there's that shutdown. But then I do see that those who have the religious aspect either on top of or just this, it's a much higher oppression and shutdown around their sexuality. And therefore, and when I'm saying sexuality, I'm not talking simply about intercourse. And I know that's why we get into this topic all the time. I love that you bring it in the realm of sensuality. And we were talking about our children earlier.
Right.
Because you think sensuality and our relationship to our bodies and how we express ourselves through our bodies, that's part of our sexuality. And we're doing that from birth. We're literally touching the world. Okay? And then we go through this awkward stage where parents and adults freak out because then we start touching ourselves. And that's where some of the freak out comes, because if you think that sex before a committed relationship is bad or wrong, and you see your child exploring themselves, just like they're exploring the blocks and the nature, right? Thing. But there's this confusion because they've been taught something as an adult. And again, remember, our parents did not learn sex ed or pleasure around sexuality. They didn't learn it. And even like my generation, we learned about safety and like not how to express yourself pleasurably.
Absolutely.
So there's this interesting thing around sensuality and the fact that our sexuality is an expression of physical experience of the world, and that even gets shut down from that early age. So,
and you know what else I wanted to mention when you said the Me Too movement and how we kind of condition our girls to, you know, transition into the world of pleasure and self-expression and all of that, because I think that a lot of people will agree with me that, let's say in the sex ed class, right, the boys will actually learn so much more about pleasure of sex as opposed to girls who are going to just kind of learn the very basics of a female sexuality as opposed to the fact that there is pleasure to be experienced.
Yeah, and I'm so glad, because I was wanting this conversation to talk about both sides of the effects of religion, because so I've done the doom and gloom and that's what draws us, right? Most people are doing something they're passionate about in the world because they had something go off and they want to make it a difference about it going forward, or I would have loved to go back in time and be someone for myself, right? So I've talked about that side, but then the flip is there's such amazing access to increased pleasure when you actually connect your spirituality, your soul, to your physical and your sexuality. And so I think, so you brought up the topic of kids and girls in school not learning about pleasure. I don't think that most people know how to talk about pleasure without being insanely uncomfortable. And I mean,
unless you're Emanuela Fernandes or
and Beth Ostrander, and then we're just like, we can't shut up about it.
Because we can talk till the cows come home.
Oh my gosh! And do you remember that night we went out on the sidewalk and we carried on? That
and
night
we just
met.
couldn't stop.
Yeah, it was so funny. Yeah.
And let me tell you something. There's some very deep conversations that happened between Beth Ostrander and Emanuela Fernandes. We could have a show together.
Seriously. And it would be 24 hours, pretty much.
Oh
wow. See, and then my mind goes to, wow, how everyone's interpreting that.
Yes,
right?
Yes,
and then wrong, bad. No, I'm just joking. I mean, it goes through my mind, but.
We can talk about pleasure, we can educate about pleasure without any feelings of shame or guilt attached to it. And I actually think we could educate the world about that. But let's move on. Let's talk. I'm going to ask you $1 million question because we actually are running out of time.
Okay.
But, you know, for a lot of you, going back to the subject of religion, of spirituality, of sensuality and sexuality, of pleasure, you know, for a lot of people, religion is a very important thing, right? And it's a very sensitive subject as well. And they need that spirituality to ground them and to inspire them and to make them feel better. So how do we find the balance between religion, you know, having that religion, but also experiencing that ultimate sensual pleasure in the bedroom, you know, anywhere else where we kind of are in life? How do we do that?
Okay, it actually is necessary to combine them, not balance them. So that's a great question. So you've asked, how do we balance our desire for religion and our sexuality? You actually entwine them. So I'm talking about the part of religion that was totally misinterpreted and caused pleasure blocks. Let's deal with that, move it out of the way. Then we bring on this gourmet, because I talk about gourmet sex life, gourmet life, being delicious. I say gourmet because it's your flavor. It's your own. I mean, I had cappuccino. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Maybe you would have had espresso. I don't know. And so that's our gourmet for the moment. And our gourmet changes and evolves and what we want and what we are craving. So your gourmet includes your value system. It includes your spirituality. So for those who it is so essential to have that groundedness, that rootedness, that connection to everything, connected to God, connected to universe, connected to the higher, that must weave for ultimate pleasure, like truly for your gourmet, you must and get to weave that in. And I did a workshop on I don't know how much time we have.
We have a couple more minutes left. Yes.
So I'll give you an example of what you can do because great, we can talk about it, but then what? So at a workshop,
we can do an unsponsored presentation right after.
Oh.
We can talk more after this.
Got it.
Yes. Two more minutes.
So how you interact your spirituality is essential because that is one of the main accesses to increased pleasure. Mm-hmm. And I think because of this misinterpretation, we do separate and we actually miss out on a deeper sexuality, a deeper pleasure that's available. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I won't carry on because I could again talk about it for a
we
long
could
time.
talk about this forever.
Mm-hmm.
We could talk about this honestly, and
Yeah.
I think that we will.
I would love to do it again.
Yes,
because there's so many aspects of it.
And you are the wealth of knowledge. So thank you so much for this. And listen, again, I thank you for what you do. You know, you have such a rich, incredible knowledge, and you also have this incredible coaching practice. So if you feel like you're disconnected from your ability to truly enjoy sexual pleasure, sensuality, you know, and if there is some sort of a spiritual aspect involved, please do not hesitate and, contact me, and I will certainly put you through in contact with Beth because she is truly fantastic. Beth, you inspire me.
Thank you. Same. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
And I want to thank you all for joining us for another episode of Sensual Talk. Much more sensual inspiration on dailysensuality.com. And of course, we'll see you next time on Sensual Talk. I'm Emanuela Fernandes.
I'm Beth Ostrander. Thank you so much.
And Beth Ostrander.
I just threw it in.
Thank you so much. What a fun time. Thank you. Thank you. All right, it's a wrap. Now, we're going to talk more.
What did you get? Can I?